Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 135. And the title of this episode is Confusing Fed, Preparing for War with Syria Without U.S. Troops. And we are going to get right into the economic news. And the title of this is Confusing Fed because we've seen the market down for the last, 4 days or 5 days or so. It's been in the red. The plunge protection team, the high-frequency traders, have been trying to prop this up, and they just couldn't because of all the news about the Fed that is going to taper in September. I mean, we have Goldman Sachs out there, J.P. Morgan, all the financial institutions. We've had, they're showing that unemployment has gone down, so it looks like tapering is going to happen. And they just couldn't keep the markets up with their normal plunge protection high-frequency trading. So someone from another state Fed had to come out and say that it doesn't look like they're going to taper, and all of a sudden the markets started to go into a positive light, and the markets went up, gold went down, and all eyes on the stock market, and that's how they fixed that problem. Again, it has nothing to do with earnings or things like that. It's what the Fed says. If Fed says they're going to taper, people get nervous and no free money's coming into the market, so they're going to get out. If the tapering is not going to happen, that means QE will continue and the market will continue to rise, and people will be happy because there's free money flowing into the market. And that's exactly what we saw. But let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to go out to Greece. And of course, Greece needs more bailout loans come 2014, which we know. And this report goes on to say that documents have revealed showing Germany's central bank predicts that the recession-hit Greece will need more rescue loans from its international creditors by the start of next year. And again, putting debt upon debt upon debt without having real revenue coming in cannot be sustained. And we are seeing this, and this is a prime example of Greece, where a year ago they told us one bailout, everything's fine, and that just didn't happen. Now, in Italy, the public debt is hitting an all-time record high. The Bank of Italy says the country's public debt has risen, setting a new record as the Eurozone struggles to overcome a deepening financial crisis. And the public debt reached 2.075 trillion euros in June, up from 1.995 trillion a month earlier. And we have to remember that Italy has high unemployment, which is around 12.1%, and about 40% of Italians between the age of 15 and 24 are without a job. So Italy, Spain, France, Greece, Cyprus, they all have high unemployment. They all have high debt, and even though the Eurozone is showing that everything is fine and Germany's coming out and everything's fine, because we do have the elections coming up in September for Germany, they have to show everything is fine. In America, the Fed just fixed the problem of the market being down. Now it's up. All eyes on the stock market. Everything looks perfect. Now, Germany, their inflation hits highest rate in 2013. German's Federal Statistics Office said in a statement on Tuesday that the annual cost of living rose 1.9%. And for the German people to keep up with this inflation, there's a report out there that's saying many of the Germans, even though they have a full-time, have taken another part-time job, mainly in the retail and catering sectors. And this has been increasing since the last quarter of 2012 as inflation goes up. Because as inflation goes up, you can't afford the groceries and the everyday expenses, so you have to get another job just to make ends meet. And thank God we don't have any inflation here in America. You know, food is not going up. They're not shrinking the size of food. Fuel is not going up. So, you know, there's no problems here whatsoever with inflation, according to the Fed, of course. Now, there are a lot of layoffs coming up, and we're looking at um, layoffs in Pratt& and Whitney, about 400 jobs. Um, H.J. Heinz Company, 600 jobs. We're looking at Micron Technology, 1,500 jobs. And we're looking at, there's also layoffs in J.P. Morgan mortgage departments in Chatsworth, which is 300 jobs. And we are seeing many companies like J.P. Morgan and Chase in Florence, South Carolina, another 450 jobs. We're seeing a lot of layoffs, especially with J.P. Morgan in the mortgage industry. And we're also seeing, like Wells Fargo home mortgages, they are laying off 763 people. Now, my question is, so we have JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, all laying off hundreds of people in their mortgage sections. So my question is, if real estate is in such a boom, why would they lay off? And house prices are rising and people are buying. President Obama's out there telling us that everything is fantastic and the housing market's starting to pick up. Why are they starting to lay off people in their mortgage departments? It doesn't make sense. Or what does make sense is that the real estate is really not doing as well as they say. It's a lot of hedge funds. It's a lot of investment companies. It's a lot of foreigners purchasing homes to flip them and make money off of them, but there's no real Americans purchasing. So it's a fake recovery. And if we look at this with the retail sales data today, the overall retail sales rose 0.2%. Okay, but that's because gasoline went up in price. Because oil right now is around $106 a barrel. So guess what's going to happen? Fuel is going to go up, and retail receipts are going to look much better. But if you really look at this, that's all there is. Nothing else happened. And what we're seeing in the furniture and home furnishings and the building material and garden equipment supplies all had a decline of 1.4%. And what does this mean? This means that people are not buying furniture for their new homes that they're purchasing. Home furnishing stores are not making sales for the new homes people are purchasing. Garden equipment, people aren't gardening for their new homes that they're purchasing. So what is happening here? We saw this same trend in prior to 2008, where the sales in home furnishings, construction supplies, garden supplies all started to fall before the real estate market completely went into the dumps. And a couple reports ago, I said that there was a report out there saying construction was also down. New home builders are seeing less and less traffic for homes. Mortgage applications are plunging, and this all leads into one thing, is that the real estate market is starting to become unhinged, and it will eventually be a repeat of 2008. Okay, now moving out to the Middle East and to Benghazi, where a whistleblower said there were 400 U.S. missiles stolen and they just don't know where they are. And, well, there's one place they probably went to where the paid mercenaries, the Syrian rebels, which are a paid mercenary group from the CIA, and at the time they were probably diverting a lot of weapons over to the paid mercenaries, and they are very worried, specifically according to these sources, about an attempt to shoot down an airliner with these missiles. And these missiles can, they can make any case for these missiles. They can say they fell into the hands of Al Qaeda, which is the CIA operatives who are paid mercenaries. And they can use them to shoot down an airliner to show that there's more terrorist threats going on, and Al-Qaeda is behind it, while they pay Al-Qaeda to fight the war in Syria to overthrow Assad. So, who knows where these 400 missiles will actually end up, and probably most of them right now are with the Syrian rebels. Now, there was another report saying that analysts sees no end in sight for U.S. drone attacks in Yemen. A former American intelligence linguistic officer says U.S. deadly drone attacks will continue in Yemen as long as the puppet governments that Americans and the British have set up there continue to exist. As long as the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency and the Western central banks are there, the U.S. government and all the Western central bank nations will protect both by fighting the uprising of the people in the Middle East. And again, we're seeing uprising in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Yemen, Egypt, Tunisia. We're seeing it happen all over the place. And again, the government is losing control out there, and they need to do something to reel the control back in. And right now they're trying to push the people in Yemen back, and they're trying to maintain control of this very strategic area where they're at the choke point of the Gulf of Aden. And Russia says that Syria peace talks will unlikely before they will not happen before October. The date keeps slipping, partly because the rebels are split and cannot decide who should represent them. Now, realistically, they do not want peace. The rebels do not want peace because they're controlled by the U.S. government. They're paid mercenaries. 95% of them are not Syrian, and their whole objective is to get into Syria and overthrow Assad, to implement the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency and set up a Western central bank, and then at that point move into Iran, which is the real prize, and do the same thing there. The only thing standing in the way is Russia. Okay. Now, with Obamacare, there's another delay. He delayed the business requirements where they had to have a certain number of employees with a certain number of hours, and they delayed that until 2015. And now they're also delaying another part of Obamacare, which is the cost caps. And what this goes on to say is why the delay. Caps on out-of-pocket costs sound great, but insurance has to be paid for somehow. These cost caps result in skyrocketing premium costs, something Democrats can't afford going into the 2014 midterm elections. This is also another case of needing more time to set up the proper resources and tools to implement new rules properly. And what they're starting to realize is that Obamacare is not this cheap insurance for the American people. It is very expensive. Premiums are skyrocketing. There's penalties on the other side if you do not take it, so you are forced. They're actually trying to force you to take it, and if you don't, they're penalizing you and businesses. And these mandates have already had drastic effects on a number of colleges and universities, which offer inexpensive defined cap plans to their healthy, youthful students. So here's some examples. Premiums at Lenoir-Rhyne University in Hickory, North Carolina, rose from $245 per student in 2011-2012 to $2,507 in 2012 and 2013. The University of Puget each student paid $165 per student in 2011-2012, and now their rates are between $1,500 and $2,000 in 2012 and 2013. And what's happening is schools have been forced to drop coverage because they could no longer afford this. And we are seeing this, and many businesses and people are saying that the costs are going to skyrocket. And we already see this in the government from the the Congress staffers, because the premiums for a single individual is $5,000 per year. And if you had a family, it was $11,000. But then again, they got bailed out. The rest of the American people will not. Now, they're in Seattle. They are trying to make politically correct words, which is a direct violation of the First Amendment. Now, I never agreed personally with this politically correct type of thing. It felt like the government was controlling and pushing everyone into the way they want them to be, and they were trying to remove words, just like back in a certain time when governments tried to get rid of books because they didn't want people to read these books and get any ideas. And it feels like the government, and both on the federal and state level, are trying to do the same thing, push us into a place where we have no opinions, we all talk the same way, we all speak the same way, use the same words that aren't offensive to anyone, everyone is the same and vanilla. And what they want to do, because these terms are offensive, the word citizen, the word brown bag, which these words have been around for, how long? Forever, as far as I know. And they are violating and using this, and the First Amendment allows us freedom of speech. Each person, every person, you are born with this right. You could say whatever you want. You can use any words you want. You do not have to be the same and put into a controlled group of what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. And to further this, the federal government is using something called Common Core, which is a federal program that all schools will eventually adopt. And it's basically a takeover of the education system. And this goes on to say Common Core is another step toward the centralization and complete takeover of education under the federal government. Education has always been controlled at the state level, giving flexibility and allowing the states to manage this on their own. And this goes on to say the bigger problem, though, is that the Common Core is indeed a federal takeover of education. America is a country founded on the principle of separate states, and this has been very beneficial for the country. States can learn from each other's policies what works and what doesn't. The people who implement policies remain more accountable, so the policies remain closer to the people. Perhaps most importantly, states can maintain cultural diversity and a sense of closeness to their unique roots. And what's happening is the federal government is making everyone teach the same way in the way they want to mold the future people into a dumbed-down state and have people only think in one way, instead of having their own minds and their own abilities and to be individuals. That's what the Founding Fathers really wanted. They wanted independence. That's why on July 4th it's called Independence Day. They wanted to be independent. They didn't want the government telling them what to do, how to act, how to speak. They wanted to be independent, to make a living, not to be taxed, not to be governed by so many laws that you can't do anything. This was the whole reason the Founding Fathers fought in the Revolutionary War. Okay, let's move on here. Now, Obama administration came out with their 67-page report on emergency planning this summer that includes what children should do and teachers should do in a school if there's an active shooter situation. And the U.S. Department of Education live shooter section doesn't recommend that schools arm teachers or employ armed guards. It doesn't even advise schools to add door locks for classrooms. It tells everyone if there is a shooter inside to run and hide. That is the only thing that they gave. And let me just say, when a school is on lockdown, and I know my children in the classroom, the windows are locked tight, the doors are locked, There is no place to go. And for little children trying to hide in a classroom, I don't care if you're 10, 11, 12, 4, 7, for them to move quick enough and to hide where under a desk or to get out the window, you have to remember children are very short and it's very difficult. Where are they running to? And what they say is the the first the the first course of action that should be taken is to run out of the building and far away until you're in a safe location. And they also suggest that don't take your personal belongings, leave them behind, and silence all your electronic devices. And if there is no other way except to fight the shooter, use a chair, a fire extinguisher, or anything like that, and try to fight the person with the gun. Now, it also goes on to say that the Obama administration it clarifies that the school employees have no duty whatsoever to physically protect students in the event of a school shooting. So all of this tells us there really is no plan on how to protect the children in the schools if there is a shooter, because they don't want to bring up that maybe the schools should have an armed guard with a weapon. See, they left out all the parts about weapons and things like that and how to protect yourself. You know, to have armed guards in a school is a huge deterrent for anyone trying to get into a school. To have the staff carry arms is also a deterrent. In those places where people are allowed to have weapons, and there are a lot of towns in America, crime and murder is at its lowest. In Chicago and Connecticut, and these places where there are gun-free zones, gun crimes are at its highest. So what are we seeing here? We are seeing a pattern. And this report that they created never mentions anything about armed guards or locking down the school, locking doors, having special security forces. Nothing. It just run and hide. And if you can, hit them with a fire extinguisher. This is their answer. Okay, let's move on here. Now, there is a warning that cyber attack will trigger bank crash. The financial industry is preparing for a massive attack by Islamist hackers in a study of the American clearinghouse DTCC. And this is the American Clearinghouse Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, named the threat scenarios for the global financial system. Thus, it is not the global debt crisis, China, and the euro crisis threatening the world order. It is the hackers from Syria and Iran. Banks are against attacks by hackers apparently only are inadequately protected, and they are ripe to be attacked at any time. And the security analysis and this intelligence brief that they did and this study shows that the Izz al-Din al-Qassam cyber fighters are the biggest threat right now to the world financial centers. And this goes on to say that if one of these groups did actually do a cyber attack on a bank, it would have disastrous consequences. In fact, most social, that everything would come to a halt because all the important processes would come to a standstill or out of control either by the dominance of the internet in banking transactions. Such a crash would amount to a reset of the financial system. It will be really hard to identify the perpetrators of such crashes, and they would not be able to know where they're coming from or have time to prepare for them. And they're saying that the financial institutions are not equipped to handle the attacks that they believe are coming. And in my other reports, I went on to say that these attacks from China, Iran, Russia, Syria are going to, this fall, bring down the financial institutions, the banking, and the government, the Fed. They're all going to say that we were on our way to becoming back on our feet with the economic conditions, and everything is completely falling apart now because of this cyber attack. And the Fed and the government will work very hard to completely help the situation. The Fed will have to print more money. The country responsible for this we're looking into, and they'll finally find out that the country might be Iran, Syria, China, Russia. Any one of these countries at the time they need to blame it on, depending on how far they get with getting all the events and everything they need to in place. Okay. Now, Dempsey is in Israel. He was in Israel and Jordan to tie last ends before Obama decides finally on U.S. military action in Syria. Now, Martin Dempsey arrived in Israel on Monday, August 12th, for critical talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other people in this thing. And the Obama plan, if it goes forward, would involve Saudi Arabia, Israel, Jordan, and possibly Turkey. And what they're planning to do is have the U.S., British, French, Saudi, and United Arab Emirates will establish a no-fly zone over central and southern Syria, stretching from the Jordanian-Israel borders up into and including Damascus. 2. The Israel Air Force will provide these forces with air cover from Syrian airspace. 3. A 40-kilometer deep military buffer zone will be drawn from the Jordanian-Israel borders up to the southern and western outskirts of Damascus. The military units controlling the zone will hold the entire area and the capital within the artillery range. 4. The southern Syrian town of Deraa, where the Syrian uprising sprang up, will be declared capital of liberated Syria. 5. President Obama has determined that there will be no American troops in the buffer zone or anywhere else on Syria's soil, only special Syrian rebel forces. Those forces will consist of 3,000 fighters trained in Jordan by U.S. military instructors. They will be headed by Jordanian special forces and operate under U.S. officers based in Jordan. And this is so, hopefully, they're hoping that Russia doesn't get involved with this, because U.S. is not invading in Syria. 8. The American Operational Command Center for Syrian operation is already in place in Amman, led by U.S. Brigadier General John Wright, who at 57 is a veteran of the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and in Libya. Number 9. The U.S. Air Force units for imposing the no-fly zones over Syria are already in position at Middle East locations and ready to go at 36 hours' notice. Number 10. A unit trained by U.S. military instructors will be a key component of the Special Rebel Force. It was put up by the million-strong community which populates 120 villages and towns in the Jabal al-Druaz area of southern Syria. They are situated in a commanding position overlooking the Syrian-Jordanian-Iraqi border triangle. 11. U.S. forces deployed in the Middle East, especially in Jordan and Israel, will stand ready for possible reprisals against American, Israeli, Jordanian, or Turkish targets if ordered by Syrian President Assad in retaliation for the no-fly and buffer zones. So what it looks like is that the U.S. plan, and they've been training for this for quite a while. Troops are already standing by. They are using paid mercenaries and paid troops to invade Syria to set up this no-fly zone. They are not sending in U.S. troops, so this way Russia and China do not have to get involved. Now, does this mean Russia and China won't get involved? Because they'll figure out what is going on and what the U.S. is actually really planning. Because they already know that the Western central bankers want to get, and they need to get into Syria and Iran to put everyone and force everyone back onto the U.S. Dollar as the reserve currency and set up the Western central banks. So this, we will have to see how this plays out. When will this happen? Well, I believe the terrorist threat in the Middle East was in order to continue the drone strikes and get everything in order and move everything into position for a main strike eventually. It was also to scare the Americans, to show why the NSA and all the other agencies are relevant. It's to make Al-Qaeda the terrorist threat, so people continually believe this. And now, before September 30th, before the fiscal year ends, to supply weapons, they need to make their move, and there's a lot of things happening during this time period, and they are getting everything ready and prepared, and we will have to see how this plays out. Listen, everyone, thanks for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.